Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Well. The series has finally come to an end. All three test matches are over. West Indies 1, England 0. The men in maroon triumphantly leap up to 7th place in the World Test Championship. And, well, the English end the series where they started, a foot at the bottom of the World Test Championship. Santoki, how does it feel?
Yeah, it feels good, Mash. A bit different from 2019. It wasn't a comprehensive win. West Indies essentially won it by the finest of margins in that final test. I think it won't go down as a classic series. People aren't going to be talking about this in years to come. But nevertheless, we got the job done. We preserved our remarkable home record against the English, which continues. And we're joined once again by George Dobell. George, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And you say people won't be talking about it. Hey, they might in Grenada. It's felt like a big deal here.
And actually, George, that's the perfect place to start, in fact, because every episode that you've been on, obviously we've been doing this in partnership with the Cricketer. So we did the preview episode after, then we did test 1, test 2, and obviously now the review of the series. And one of the kind of running themes throughout the series was the local fans or lack thereof. But boy, did they turn out in Grenada, and possibly unsurprisingly so. And if anything, George, were you surprised by, I don't want to say the lack of numbers from England fans, but it certainly wasn't overwhelming like it was in Antigua and Barbados. But you're there on the ground. What was it like, the atmosphere across the 4 days of the test match?
Oh, there are a lot of England supporters still. There were. I think every hotel room's full in the island. I say that with some experience because I don't have one for tomorrow night. There are a lot of England supporters, but not as many as Barbados. I don't know how many times I heard England supporters say, by the way, it'll be Grenada I visit from now on, not Barbados. Because Grenada made a real effort. It felt like a big deal having cricket here. And they really sort of threw their arms open wide at us. And of course, it was also a more fun wicket. It wasn't great by any means, but it was it gave some encouragement. So the atmosphere changed a lot. Those first couple of days was absolutely dominated by the England supporters, but it also changed during the course of the day. You know, local people came in a bit later, and actually it was kind of fun. The press box here is outside, so you feel it more. You know, you feel more part of it. You could hear it more. Sure as hell hot, and there was a more authentic, I suppose you would say, Caribbean cricket sound, and that was lovely to see. And the celebrations at the end were special. You know, wow, they went on and on and on, and they were properly loud. So as I say, it felt like it mattered, and that's great. And if there weren't. You know, I think I said this last time, people in the Caribbean are more used to the sunshine, and they don't necessarily try and sit out in it all day. So you don't necessarily see all the people. And also, you know, there was no furlough here, so people are taking the opportunity to work while they can. But later in the day, and certainly over the weekend, the ground was, it was dominated by local supporters.
Yeah, and I think most definitely on the Saturday and Sunday, there were what I call the classic Caribbean cricket sound, or almost like that hum that you get in a test in the West Indies when there's a lot of West Indians there. But yeah, that was great to see, and almost like a classical way to end the test series, actually actually surrounded by the sound of a quintessential West Indian test match. But Santoki, you and I have both been reading a lot of what George has put out, and in fairness, the rest of the English press. They aren't happy, Santoki. where do we want to start with this?
Oh, boy, this could be a whole podcast series in itself, I guess. But I guess, George, the one thing let's start with is, do you think long term losing this series would almost slightly benefit England in terms of now there has to be an introspection and they have to look into it? Whereas if they had won the series, you would say it kind of papered over the cracks, and they could say the Red Bull reset has started, that has been successful. So, do you think a loss has ultimately long term will change how England kind of looks at its test game?
You'd like to think so, but I don't, because it will need regime change. Look, they've just been thrashed in the Ashes. I mean, shouldn't that have been a wake-up call? Shouldn't losing to New Zealand, and they're not going to win that India series, it might be a draw. All the other series that they've struggled in, couldn't they be a wake-up call? So no, I think that the problems are fairly deep-rooted, and actually the people who are in charge will use this to further their own agenda anyway. So I'm not particularly optimistic that good will come of it, but you're right, I guess it could. Hey, one thing I should mention, because it's been I haven't written as much about West Indies for the Cricketer as I used to for Cricinfo, because it's a different audience. But one thing I noticed at the end yesterday was the West Indies team going around the ground and thanking the supporters, including the England supporters.
Yeah,
I didn't see the England team do that, and I thought they should have done.
Yeah, I'm glad you've pointed that out, because I was wondering if that had happened. Obviously, because I saw like clips of like the Barmy Army clapping the West Indian players, and in fairness, let me give kudos to the England fans. They are knowledgeable and they recognise good cricket, or they recognise
they're very generous.
Played well.
They're generous. Look, Craig Brathwaite got a proper standing ovation in Barbados. So I got no issue with the England travelling support and the Barmies at all. I think they're terrific, and I actually think the England team, one or two of them came out. I know Johnny Bairstow made a point of coming out, but however disappointed you are, however tired and hot you are, I think they should have come out. And I actually think the West Indies team really enjoyed playing in front of crowds throughout the series, and sometimes those crowds were dominated by England supporters. But I think they just enjoyed that there were people there again after a couple of quiet years. So I thought that was a really, really nice touch. And, talking to Craig Brathwaite, for example, afterwards, it obviously meant a lot to him. Bumped into Josh De Silva last night having a drink. He was out with Ben Stokes, by the way, because there was obviously a bit of, stuff going on between them. But I thought it was kept on the right side of things. It was just two competitive guys desperately wanting to win. It's exactly what you want, and clearly they respect each other and were getting on well. So I thought that was really nice to see. But I'm sorry I didn't get to write more about West Indies and some of the things that are going right, because I actually think it is quite an important series. Clearly, these are two fairly modest sides. Yeah. I don't think anyone's about to claim they're going to win the World Test Championship. But it is nice to see them go in the right direction, and actually go in the right direction with a couple of younger players. So, there was something joyful about that. And actually, I think everyone who was at the ground yesterday, including all the disappointed England supporters, will have been touched, maybe the wrong word, too strong a word, but really impressed by the celebrations, because they were something.
And I think you mentioned there's obviously a few young players in the squad. It's important to remember as well, for a lot of these players, Bonner, De Silva, Mayers, they spent most of their test career so far playing in front of no fans, empty stadiums because of COVID. So this was, especially for Josh De Silva getting that century, this was a rare opportunity to be in front of home fans and get that celebration. But let's just talk about Josh De Silva, because obviously he was man of the match. His century essentially guided West Indies to that win. George, what did you make of his batting performance? Bear in mind, it was a century where he had to guide a tail end, not notorious for staying in very long at the crease.
I thought he was magnificent. I'm full of respect for him. It sounds quite simple, but he really gutsed it out. I don't know how many runs he'd scored after his first 90 balls. Off the top of my head, it seems like 11. I mean, he was just defending, and you're beginning to wonder where any runs would come from. But he did the old thing. He played the ball right in front of his eyes. He made them get him out. And also, he adjusted. He got his body in the way. He took some blows because there were some up and down bounce. So he was physically brave. He was defiant, determined, strong. Look, that was a series-changing innings. You could have argued that he should have won Player of the Series. I mean, they got it right, I think. But fantastic. He did full of respect for him. Bonner did something similar, obviously, in the first test of the series. I know Bonner's older, but he's no more experienced, is he, as a test player, I don't think. And you could say that maybe Seals was the best seamer in the series. I think he's still 20, isn't he?
Yeah.
So, Alzari had moments. He certainly bowled with some pace and fire on this quite slow surface. There's something there that needs nurturing. And Mayers was just... I love Mayers as a batter, by the way. That guy's going to get run, surely. I know that you've probably been saying that for years, but there's a lot to like in that guy.
What do you think? What do you think Mayers did right in that test? Because obviously, with his medium pace, he managed to get 7 wickets across the test.
This is the slightly frustrating thing from an England perspective, is that those guys did the basics of cricket well, and that's not to diminish what they've done, yeah. But De Silva was a lot about patience and determination. He didn't play Brian Lara-esque shots that make you gasp. He blocked the hell out of it. He had a tight defence and he was brave. I don't think it's asking too much for some of the England players to do that. That's why it's so frustrating to watch Zach Crawley waft like a millionaire. I saw someone on Twitter say he bats like his dad's a millionaire, which I thought was a great line. But it's so frustrating when they give it away a wee bit. And the same with Mayers. Look, Mayers hits the seam, puts the ball in good areas, decent skills. He does vary his pace, and I wondered sometimes whether that was happening because he doesn't always complete his action in exactly the same way. I don't know the answer to that. But also, he did have skills. He does run his fingers over the ball sometimes to take pace on. And as I say, he did hit the seam, but he did get a bit of movement. The ball in the first innings that got you a route was a beauty. It's terrific bowling. But when people talk about county cricket and, there's a bowler in county cricket, I think he's 45, called Darren Stevens.
That's exactly who I was thinking of, George. Exactly.
Right. And he does bowl that sort of, he maybe doesn't hit the pitch quite as hard, but very similar. And it's exactly what English players should be able to play. You get a big stride in, you don't push at the ball. I'm not saying it's easy, but England was sort of outplayed by people doing the basics of the game well. That's a bit frustrating.
So, I mean, I was a bit flabbergasted by it all, George, simply because, don't get me wrong, as you've correctly pointed out, they are two modest sides, but the level of, and I'm going to call it ineptitude, because
it's a strong word, but I think
okay, let's say that. Okay, ineptitude's strong. Okay, the level of surrender. The level of surrender, I thought, I don't know, George. As an outsider looking in, are we really saying that's where English cricket is at now? Because it wasn't, with all due respect, it wasn't a 120 all-out pitch in the second innings. It wasn't. It just needed someone to just dig in a bit. Is that really where English cricket's at?
Yes. Bear in mind, there are 100. Sorry, go on, Santaki.
I was just going to say, Saqib Mahmooda did dig in with the bat. Unfortunately, he's a number 11, so it kind of spoke volumes for England's batting performance that the number 11 was the highest scorer across both innings.
They were 114 for 9, I think, in the first innings too, to put it in perspective. So they could have been all out for 120 in both innings. And I think Leach and Saqib both gave chances. So is that where English cricket is? Yeah, it's awful. It's as bad as it's ever been. Anyone who's denying this is part of the problem at this stage. English cricket, let's put it in perspective, is beset by an inclusion problem. It's got a race crisis. It hasn't got any money. I would say it's both morally and financially just about bankrupt. It is bottom of the Test Championship table. Bottom with all the resources. They've invested a farm on a competition that no one asked for, no one else in the world plays. They completely seem to be committed to that strategy, and it's a bad strategy. The game is behind a paywall. If you had given the game to people who wanted to destroy cricket, I don't think they could have done a better job of it. Absolutely amazing. What is also amazing is that I would have said the same about West Indies cricket when Dave Cameron was in charge.
Yeah, and to me, you wouldn't have been wrong. And I guess just touching on some of the themes you kind of raised earlier, like, who falls on their sword now? So I'm going to just throw some names at you. And actually, my question isn't who falls on their sword. My question more is who's willing to fall on their sword, not who actually will fall on their sword. So,
well, this is funny you should say, because the reason that we don't have a chair of the ECB at the moment is because he was a decent person who did fall on his sword when they made the wretched decision, of which he was part, to not tour Pakistan. But because they all basically agreed with that, you know, just about everyone in control agreed with the decision not to go, but none of them were foolish enough to allow their names to be pinned to the decision, apart from Ian Watmore, because he's an honourable fella. So right now, in the last few weeks, England have basically fired a coach, a batting coach, and the managing director. You can just keep firing people. Yeah, get rid of Joe Root if you want to. It won't make any bloody difference. It won't make any difference. If you crash a car into a rock and fire the bus driver, it won't make the car go. It's the problems are beyond individuals. But I thought a couple of times in the last day or two that we've been talking to, say, Paul Collingwood this morning and Joe Root yesterday, and I thought the wrong people were answering the questions.
Yeah.
It should be Tom bloody Harrison. But Paul Collingwood had an interesting theory, by the way. He thought that basically England put a lot into the first two tests, which they did. They probably were leading the running in those two tests. They probably, you know, played most of the cricket, as he put it. That's fair. And then the disappointment of that De Silva partnership, the frustration, the panic, broke them physically, mentally. All those overs, all that heat suddenly got to them. And then you carry that mental fragility into your batting, and you don't concentrate as, say, Bonner did, as Brathwaite did, and then De Silva did. So in each test, you've got a West Indies batter just concentrating the hell out of the situation, just really wanted it. And again, I don't mean to diminish their efforts by saying that, but that is part of the long format game. And English cricket has embraced flair to the point where it seems like you're not allowed to play defensive shots anymore. I mean, Zach Crawley is the sort of, you know, if you go to a ground, you'd rather watch Zach Crawley get 100 than Craig Brathwaite if you're an impartial spectator. But you've got to earn the right. And De Silva in particular in this game, God, he earned the right, didn't he? He really ground it down. And so I'm not at all optimistic, because Tom Harrison's going to go anyway in a few weeks. I think we know that. But who's going to replace him? I don't know. I kind of hope it's Johnny Grave, to be honest. But geez, it'd be inheriting a Met. Well, it'd be very typical, wouldn't it? But you know, English cricket allows a talent to slip away, sees that someone else is benefiting from it, and think we'll have him.
Well, let me officially say hands off with regards to with regards to Johnny Grave, and that's a good segue, actually, Santoki, from George, because I'm not using the word Santoki because we've heard it so many times. No, this doesn't represent West Indies turning a corner, so I'm not using that, Santoki. What I will say, Santoki, is Phil Simmons was under pressure. You and I have probably said it was undue pressure, but he was under pressure, and I think if West Indies had lost this series, I actually think certain individuals within West Indies cricket would have made sure he went sooner rather than later. He's probably bought some time now, Santoki. But if you look at his record since becoming head coach, Santoki, he's led us now in 17 Test matches, won 6, drawn 4, lost 7. And I keep arguing, Santoki, that we haven't had it that good in such a long time that it almost beggars belief that he is under pressure.
Yeah, when you think with the resources he works with, and kind of especially not having any domestic cricket for the past 2 years, picking players out of that, he's performed very well in the job. And like you said, Mash, I think if West Indies had lost this series to England,
Santoki was about to say something controversial there, which has made him freeze, but I will continue his point. So, George, yes, as Santoki sorts out his net connection, yeah, how did you see it from? I mean, treat how you would have seen it from an English perspective, though, George, because you know a bit about West Indies and how everything is run. Did you feel that same level of pressure from the West Indies camp?
Yeah. I think, and beyond Phil Simmons, I think Ricky Skerritt was probably under pressure. I think, the fact is that under Dave Cameron in 2019, they were still under Cameron, weren't they? Yeah, they were. They won the series, and he, could argue that he would. Well, I'm sure he would take credit for it. And I realised how divided the Caribbean media is, the Caribbean cricket media, and also one or two quite influential people in the Caribbean media have at times been paid by certain parties to push their point of view, so there will be people with vested interests, and the way that Phil Simmons came back, having successfully sued Cricket West Indies, gets a great big payday, and then immediately gets the job back. Some people will resent him forever because he beat them, didn't he? And the same with. I honestly thought when England hosted West Indies in 2020 that there were people in the Caribbean desperately wanted West Indies to lose. And
I would agree.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no way that you're trying to get Phil Simmons sacked on the eve of the tour if you thoroughly want them to win. But let's not go back to Conde Riley. But I cannot believe Barbados cricket can't do better than him. Anyway, I've made this point. So yeah, I thought they were under huge pressure. You could definitely argue that it was, for the good of world cricket what's happened. But all I would say, and I passionately mean this, because we say all the time, well, world cricket needs a strong West Indies, and it's true. World cricket needs a strong Pakistan, undoubtedly. Well, you know what? It needs a strong England too. Yes. And I'm really worried about the future of England. I really worry because I think there's absolute possibility they're just going to turn their back on Test cricket. And if England turns their back on Test cricket, how long do you reckon the game's got? It's got a few years. If England turns their back on Test cricket, there's no way West Indies are playing Test cricket in 20 years. That's
that much I agree with. And some people listening to this might think George is coming on a bit strong here, but I actually get where George is coming from, Santolki, because so that England performance in the final test almost reminded me of some of the shambolic England performances I would see in the 90s when it was almost like they were a bit of a joke side, and like, you'd see these shambolic test performances, and it always felt like everyone was in on the joke, that they were just a bit shambolic.
Well, wait, to be fair, the West Indies side at times. I mean, I grew up with, as you know, a lot in the 80s. They were kind of Superman. It was no disgrace to be bowled out by Malcolm Marshall. And actually, the first innings at the Kensington Oval in 2019, it wasn't any disgrace to be bowled out by Kemar Roach. It was more of an issue to be bowled out by Roston Chase in the second innings, in 2019. No, but I've seen England bowled out in the UAE by two Pakistani spinners, and I watched it and just thought, 74, not a bad score. Go on, play that. It was impossible, This isn't that side. I'm not having a go at the West Indies cricket. I'm really not. I'm just saying that you've got to get it in perspective. England have been beaten by 10 wickets, so I'd dispute that it was by the barest of margins, by a side that was ranked 8th in the world. And while England have this narrative that it's terribly hard to win in the Caribbean, it's not like other people have struggled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you could not. So if people are saying, "Oh, I'm going off on one. This is nonsense, hyperbole," just read what's happening in English cricket. They have already compromised their test plans. They already have, in the middle of the season, a great big white ball window. They have invested in new competition because they think it's necessary to have a different financial model. But it becomes self-fulfilling. If you have a test team that is playing this badly, of course the broadcasters aren't going to keep paying the same amounts. Of course people aren't going to pay tens of thousands of pounds to go and watch Australia and this. And it's this tour, it hasn't been great because the pitches have been extremely disappointing. And again, Cricket West Indies have to take some responsibility for that. But so do Barbados cricket in particular. I think Antigua has long-standing problems with that surface. I think, realistically, in a few years, they'll probably be playing their test matches at the old Stamford ground, and that's fine. But does Barbados want West Indies cricket to thrive, or are there personal disputes between them and other people? Don't know the answer. It might just be they wanted to keep everyone in the ground for long enough. But it hasn't been a vintage series, and it feels that a lot of stuff is conspiring. And if you're an England supporter who spent thousands thousands and thousands of this. It just feels like a slap in the bloody face. So I don't see any evidence that the ECB are prioritising Test cricket. There are a lot of other attractions. There is absolutely no room for complacency about the future of Test cricket. So while I say again, England, world cricket needs strong West Indies, world cricket needs strong lots of sides. Don't forget England. It's getting that bad.
We nearly tweeted that world cricket needs a strong England side in with a tongue in cheek, but actually it really does. And in fairness, George, it's going to be people like you who ultimately are going to have to put the difficult questions to the relevant stakeholders over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, until it's felt that the red ball game is taken seriously. Santoki, I guess final few points on the West Indies though. Bangladesh will be our red ball. Bangladesh will be our next assignment. There are some questions, Santoki, that still haven't been answered for me. John Campbell opening, Shamar Brooks at number 3. Jermaine got a century, but you know that people will still say that he shouldn't necessarily be in the team as well. You've written a recent article for the Night Watchman on our problems with embracing spin. For the 3rd test, Pamol was dropped. It worked, but that's not a template you use going forward all the time. So still a lot of questions for us for when Bangladesh turn up.
Yeah, like you said, Mash, this isn't West Indies turning over a new leaf by winning this series. The final test, De Silva's innings essentially masked the frailties in the top 5-6 batting lineup. As you said, John Campbell, still serious question marks over him. Shamar Brooks. The problem is, have we got adequate replacements to come in? We've obviously got 3 rounds of first-class cricket coming up in May, and that will largely determine who can kind of work their way into the test side, because you'd imagine there's about 4 or 5 spots up for grabs despite this win. So it'll be interesting few months. You'd expect us to win at home against Bangladesh, but Bangladesh have had an excellent 2022 so far. So it's going to be a tough series regardless, and I'm interested to see if West Indies can kind of carry on this success against them.
Yeah, and then linking back to you, George, because we haven't addressed. Yes, we know the situation is bigger than the team and who plays and etc. etc. But for the benefit of particularly the England fans who'll be listening to this, is that the end of Overton? Is that the end of Wokes? Saqib Mahmood has shown that maybe he's worth persisting with. What are the kind of pertinent selection questions that may have been answered, or what are, from an English perspective, who are the players where you're thinking, yeah, you're gonna have to take a drop now?
Can I just answer the one on West Indies first?
Go for it. Sorry, yeah.
Well, is it Raymond Reefer?
Yes,
scored a century in the warm-up game. I did wonder whether he could open the batting.
Oh,
well, he seemed to have a good technique. Admittedly, the pitch was slow, and maybe he'll be hurried, but he looked to have a lot going for him. And of course, he can bowl too, and he could reverse it in his left arm. Just a thought. And in terms of spinners, I was a bit surprised. I think they went for the wrong left armour. Oh Lord, I forgot his name. I wouldn't pick Cornwall.
Warwican.
Yeah, Warwican. Yeah, that's the way I would have gone. I wouldn't go Cornwall, but it depends if you want a left armour or offie, I suppose, as well. Pamol struggled, didn't he? In terms of the questions that England answered, Chris Wokes has had now an opportunity to lead the attack in the Caribbean. It pains me to say it clearly didn't work out. I don't see a lot of. I mean, if he's opening the bowling when England get to Pakistan, which is their next overseas test tour, you would probably not be hugely optimistic. In terms of Craig Overton, I mean, again, I feel he gave it his all. I just don't think he's quite got the quality for Test cricket. He might have a role as a workhorse in certain situations, but if he is taking the new ball, it feels a bit toothless. And he's a worthy cricketer. He's brave. He gives it everything. You know, a lot of people would, I guess. He's not quite there, is he? I thought Ben Folkes didn't quite take his opportunity. I think it's very difficult to keep in the Caribbean, isn't it? The outfields can be hard and uneven, and can make you look a bit more untidy than you are, and I think Silva would say that too. But you know, I think he averaged 19 with the bat. That run out felt a bit gormless. It very much reminded me of Ramps in '94. I don't know, the 46 all-out game. Ramps came in at 3 and was run out, I think, attempting a second. Felt like that. To be fair to him, there were a couple of dismissals trying to set up declarations. You know, I think a few of them won another opportunity. I thought Dan Lawrence showed enough to win another opportunity. I thought Saqib showed enough to win another opportunity. I actually thought Jack Leach kicked on. And then, you know, did Alex Lees do enough at the top of the order? I mean, he had 6 innings, 4 of them on the flattest wickets you will ever see. And he has a top score of the series of 31. He looked tough. He looked determined, not positive he's good enough. I think he'll need a good start to the county season. And then what the hell do you do with Zach Crawley? I mean, what do you do with him?
That's what I was waiting for you to answer.
Well, I think you probably stick with him because I think he's got, you know, there's a lot to like. And as I said on Twitter the other day, he has a good eye and in the land of the blind because England are in the land of the blind. But I think there are opportunities for all sorts of people like Rory Burns and Dom Sibley. At the start of the county season, you know, there'll be 6 rounds of games or something before a test squad is selected. So if Dom Sibley, who I'm told is hitting it very well, gets 3 or 4 hundreds in those round of games, same with Rory Burns, I expect they come back in. And maybe Crawley goes down to 3. I don't know. There's lots of ways you could do it. But the bowling looked toothless and the top order looked fragile. That's a bad combo, eh?
Just one final question before we wrap this, George. If it was an option, sorry, no, I'm not actually going to answer it. I'm not going to answer that question. Who's your head coach, George? If you can pick anyone, assuming Collingwood doesn't keep it, maybe he will because I don't know what direction England are going in. But assuming he doesn't, who can possibly get a tune out of this side, irrespective of all the outside flaws and so on and so forth? Would you bring back, for example, if he wanted to, an Andy Flower?
Well, I've asked him, but he says he doesn't want to.
Well, that's that one. Well, that's that then.
but you know, but maybe you could persuade him. But I think he has been there and done it, and it probably needs someone to have incredible energy. But you know, I wouldn't have sacked, and I think I'm the only one of the press pack out here who did. I wouldn't have sacked Chris Silverwood, and I wouldn't have sacked Ashley Giles because I don't think they're the problem. In the same way, I don't think sacking Joe Root will help. It's probably going to be Ben Stokes who's captain. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Marcus North ended up being director of cricket. But I mean, there are lots of names out there. And who ends up being coach? I don't know. I mean, they'll split it. So I expect Collie will end up being coach of the white ball team. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we got an Australian or something, because that seems to be the default thing in English cricket. They looked. It's like a lot of club cricket in England is dominated by overseas players. They bowl 20 overs from one end. They might bowl with the new ball and at the death in limited overs cricket. They might open the batting. You know what I mean? I think that we give responsibility away too quickly. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if someone like Justin Langer became head coach if he's mad enough to want it. They're all going to come up against the same structural problems. You know, we've got a domestic competition that doesn't produce players. It's completely unarguable at the moment. And when Andy Flower took that side to number 1 in the world, it produced players very clearly. 4 of them came into the side and hit centuries on debut. Those days are gone, but it needs someone who's going to force the ECB to listen and to change things. I thought Ashley Giles understood everything. If he had his time again, I suspect he'd be more forceful in trying to change things. You know, he allowed things to sort of drift on until it was too late and he was blamed for them. But I think you could put Jesus in charge of this side. They're still going to struggle.
Santoki. I never thought I'd see the day, Santoki, where England have deeper structural issues. We have George is calling for Jesus to come down to save everyone.
Well, I was perplexed because I've seen on social media there's growing calls for Sam Billings to be made captain, and I've seen him playing in the IPL. So that was, for me, that was the point where I thought England have completely lost their heads, just calling for anyone to come in and save the sides. But as George said, I guess there's no a lot of people are calling for Joe Root to go. There's no short-term fix. There's wider systematic issues. So whoever you put in place, whether it be Stokes or someone else, they're going to face the same issues. And this same conversation will come up this time next year unless radical changes are made at the top of the ECB hierarchy, I think.
Yeah, well, and they'll keep losing. Sorry, but they will. I mean, they're about to play New Zealand. That's tough. Then this time next year, they're in New Zealand. And they've got to go to Pakistan. I mean, honestly, how are they going to get on in Pakistan? I mean, how are they going to bowl Pakistan out?
Imagine
Baba sitting there, he'll be drooling.
At least you'll get to be there, George.
Yes.
And see it all. You're basically in West Indies territory now, where you just have to rally and hope, and hope something turns around against all the odds.
Yeah. Well, yes, I understand that you feel my pain. All I would say is that you can look back on this incredible, illustrious history. I had 18 months in about 2010 to look back at. Yeah.
It was heady times, though. It was real heady times.
And now they all hate each other. Yeah. At least your guys, all those legends of cricket, there's something there that unifies and will live forever. You've got KP and Matt Pryor, who genuinely seem to detest each other, don't they? So the memories of it have been ruined a bit. Yeah, I don't know what I did in a past life to deserve to be doing this, but anyway, there we are. It was genuinely lovely to see the celebrations, and yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily feel like a turning point, but it's a step in the right direction, and it was reward for good people doing good things. So that's kind of always lovely to see.
And actually, I love that end, George. That's perfect. A reward for good people doing good things. And what an apt way to describe West Indies' ultimate series win over England. And that kind of culminates all of the pods and the articles and the VODs. And we hope you've enjoyed it. Us alongside George for this 3-test match series and all of the work with the cricketer. George, thank you so much for giving up your time. I certainly know, based on all the download figures, that people have enjoyed these pods that you've done with us. Safe flight and safe journey back, George, and we look forward to linking up again.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it.
No worries. Ladies and gentlemen, that's been another episode of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules seem coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.